Administrative assistant, office coordinator, executive assistant. These titles sound exempt, but the Department of Labor's actual test disqualifies most of them. And for a company with just 10 employees in these roles, misclassification exposure can easily exceed $250,000. Hey, my name is Alex Castro. I'm a labor and employment attorney with AXC Legal based out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Everything that we're going to talk about today, it's not legal advice, it's general information only. But if it sounds like something that you or your business are dealing with, click the link below to schedule a consultation. Exemptions from overtime can be really complicated. And one of the most common ones is called the administrative exemption. This one relies on a 3-part test to get it right. Requirement number 1 is that the employee needs to be paid on a salary basis. You currently need to be paid $684 per week at minimum, which it comes out to about $36,000 annually. There's really no exceptions or prorating to this rule. I'll tell you right now that this number, 684, is being challenged actively in court, and so don't be surprised if in a year, 2 years, 3 years, that number spikes up to about $900, $1,000. But for right now, 684 a week is what an employee needs to make. Second test the employee needs to meet is the primary duty test. The primary duty test says that the employee's primary duty needs to be office, non-manual work that's directly related to management or business operations or those of their customers. Think finance, accounting, human resources, safety, auditing, legal. The last part is that an employee needs to use discretion and independent judgment when exercising these duties. And it has to be on things that are actually significant to the business. Let's talk about some really common misclassification traps. Bar none, number 1 is job title. It doesn't matter. So what the law actually cares about is what somebody actually does. So just because somebody is called an administrative assistant or a special operations coordinator doesn't actually make them exempt. It's what the employee actually does that determines whether or not they're exempt. Some really common examples of roles that are often misclassified tend to be like the first level customer facing support. Some routine like tasks that often end up misclassified. Think of employees who do primarily data entry or scheduling or basic bookkeeping, regardless of how much money they make. These typically are mundane types of tasks that don't require the use of independent judgment. Pay special attention to jobs that are titled with coordinator or specialist. Anyone who's got assistant in that title, take a look at what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis. So administrative assistants, very commonly misclassified. Even if they do sometimes do kind of high-level work, it tends not to be the bulk of their work or therefore their primary duty. Another example, office managers. A lot of office managers are folks who are sometimes just ordering additional paper or sodas for the fridge. Sales coordinators and customer service supervisors often are misclassified as well because they, again, are that kind of first level customer support. And then finally, really any role where the employee is primarily following established procedures. If an employee has any sort of guidebook, any sort of script, any sort of routine checklist that they follow when doing their job, that really cuts into the idea that they're working on, that they have independent judgment and discretion in what they do. Let's talk about the financial exposure that you can hit when you get these things wrong. First, there's a 3-year look back period on this. So if you have misclassified an employee gets to look back 3 years from the date of their claim and seek compensation for all 3 of those years. Whatever the employee has determined that they were actually improperly withheld, you have to pay double of what that is, and in some states, it's 3 times. And if all that wasn't enough, there's a ton of legal fees involved here. So obviously you have to pay your own lawyer to do this. The law also says that you owe the employee's lawyer's fees if they prevail. But you also have to multiply this because typically these mistakes don't happen on an individual employee level. They're often kind of systemic violations. So let's talk about what some of these numbers actually look like. I see it very commonly that for a year of unpaid overtime, an employee might be owed $10,000 in back wages, but now you've got to double or triple that. So now you're looking at $20,000 to $30,000 on just the wages alone. It's going to cost you at least $20,000, maybe up to $50,000 in attorney's fees, depending on how far the case goes, and even higher if you go to trial. So now you're looking at a situation where you missed $10,000 in overtime over the course of a year, and now your total legal bill for one employee, by the way, is what, $100,000, maybe even a little bit more. Take that number and multiply it by all the amounts of employees that have been also misclassified here, and you've got a huge liability on your hands. So if you're in HR, what do you do next? First of all, it's time to start auditing all of these salaried positions. I would first look at anybody that's got administrative in their title because that's often a trap that this role may not actually be doing the high level work that you think they might be doing or that you want to represent that they're actually doing. So take a look at what they're actually doing. Document the actual duties performed, not just what's in the job description. So it's time to start looking at what this employee actually does on a day-to-day basis. If you're in HR, you're often going to have to talk to the manager about this because you just don't have the visibility on what exactly somebody on some other random team is doing all day long. But I'll take a word of caution. Don't take the manager's word at face value. If you're ever in doubt, classify as non-exempt. It's the safer position. You know that you're going to be paying out overtime, and by paying out overtime, yes, you're going to spend more money upfront on these wages, but you're going to save yourself a lot of money on the back end in case you got this wrong. And I'll tell you this, even if you misclassify one employee, the cost of getting that wrong is probably more than the savings if you just went non-exempt for 10 different employees, for example. If you're responsible for employment compliance and want to determine whether your administrative classifications are creating exposure, request a wage and hour classification audit. We'll review your actual job descriptions and duties against the DOL's 3-part test and make sure that you're on good grounds when classifying folks one way or the other.